Welcome back to the Core Combatives Podcast, an RMA experience. I'm here with my mentor, co-founder of the RMA system, Shihan Wol-Isaac. And for this episode, actually, we had something else planned. We were going to start the explanation of what we started talking in episode 1 about the mindset for competitors, the mindset that you should adopt the 12 things, the 12 items that we have to observe. And as a checklist, as an overall understanding of everything related to competition. But facing what is happening in the world today, and we really mentioned the preparedness. We had the preparedness principles segment last time, and we had, of course, before that, we had the reality warrior principle, and we got a lot of great feedback, especially about those two segments. So it was interesting because we ended up having two types of people watching us. We had the regular jiu-jitsu guys, the martial artists, and etc. And then we had all these other guys more into self-defense and combatives, which is all martial arts, of course. But, sometimes some people focus way more on self-defense and combatives, and blades training, firearms, and all of that. And then there's some people that are just into sports. We're always going to blend. We're always going to have those components. And I think that maybe the format for the next might vary. For instance, the first one we approached the sports side of martial arts competition, and then we went through the reality warrior principles and the preparedness principles. In this episode, we're going to switch. We're going to start actually with the preparedness principles, because I think it might take a little longer. And then we do the reality warrior principles. And then in episode 3, we keep going. The reason why I proposed this to Shihan Walt was, first of all, we see what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine war, the involvement of so many countries providing aid to Ukraine, and all the sanctions that all nations now will, it seems that EU will increase the number of sanctions. There's some specialists talking about the major food shortage, especially due to the lack of fertilizers next year. Then we have winter coming. We have hurricane season right now in the United States, and overall instability right in the world. There's so many things going on. I hope people are tuned in and start tracking everything that's going on. So we are here. We're in a very safe country in our homeland, but we definitely we're already feeling the effects of the war, the pandemic, the lockdowns, everything, all the wrongdoings, I would say, from many leaders, trying to implement this over control over us, and then we see the results of the lockdown, especially in the economy. We have so many different types of shortages, and I don't know. I think it's a great moment to talk more about the preparedness. So, don't want to take too much time with the intro here. Don't forget to please subscribe, like, share wherever you're getting this podcast. Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. The more you guys interact with us, we got some really good questions sent to us already. And I'm first of all, I'm really thankful for all of you viewers and listeners. But anyway, Shihan Wol-Isaac, we're going to start from, usually we leave that to the end on this episode. We're going to start first with the preparedness principles.
Thank you, Professor, and welcome everyone. Before we get started, I just want to say, first of all, I want to say congratulations to everyone this past weekend at our core. We had a graduation, and all the people that graduated,
including you,
honor belts and the black belts, and Greg Davis and his black belts, all the great, all the black belts, brown belts, blue belts, purple belts, white belts that contributed their time even to help, to show up for the event. So I just want to congratulate everybody. What a great job, and what a what a close camaraderie we have between all the core families. So I just want to congratulate everybody. Great job, and thank you, Professor.
Yeah, of course, and congratulations for your 3rd degree in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So
thank
we
you,
don't
Professor.
forget
My
that.
honor.
Yeah,
my honor. Thank you so much, Professor.
Our honor.
Yeah, so I just want to congratulate everybody, and remember that we keep everybody right now down in Florida dealing with this hurricane coming in our prayers too. So as we get into this preparedness segment, what I'm gonna basically ask you is this question. Are you a prepper? Because you may be watching this show this evening thinking, I'm not a prepper, that you're not a prepper, you don't have anything to do with prepping. But I want to see if that's true. I want to ask you a few questions to see if we can actually ascertain whether or not that's actually true or not. So when you think of a prepper, you might just think of someone that's just crazy, someone that's just a total nutball, totally crazy. But like I said last week, if you can give me a good reason why it's a bad idea to be prepared, then please let us know. But generally speaking, it's kind of hard to do. It would be hard to do that, right? To be prepared for some bad situation that occur, so that when it occurs, it becomes maybe not a major problem, but more of an inconvenience, or maybe not even any problem at all because you have, or inconvenience at all because you have what it takes to deal with easily, right? So obviously being a prepper is not a bad idea. That we've clarified, I think last week. And I want to just be sure that you know for sure whether or not you're a prepper. So let me just ask you a few questions. So the first thing I want to say is, when you go to sleep at night, do you lock the doors?
Yes.
When you leave your home to go to the store to shop, do you lock your doors? Okay, so that's
yes.
If you do that, why do you do that? Do you have something maybe like a AAA in a membership, for your vehicle when you're on your vehicle in case you break down? You have AAA. Some of you might not, but some of you might. And if you do, why do you have that? When you drive in your car, do you wear a seatbelt? Now, I know some people that don't like seatbelts and don't wear seatbelts, but generally speaking, it can be a good idea, because the cons of wearing a seatbelt versus the pros of wearing a seatbelt overall definitely outweigh the pros outweigh the cons when it comes to that. And I know that some have tactical reasons and so on and so forth, but there's ways we can work around that and deal with that as well. But most people are going to wear a seatbelt, and you should, because it's also the legal and lawful thing to do as well, right? So most people wear a seatbelt. Do you have a first aid kit or some sort of medical supplies on hand in your vehicle or at home, and so on and so forth, at your workplace? Do you have jumper cables in your car? Do you have a spare tire? Do you have a jack? Do you have a lug wrench? Do you have that in your car? If so, why? And if you don't, why not? I don't know why you wouldn't either. But so if you lock your doors at night, why do you do that? Because you're preparing, because you don't want just anybody to come walking into your house. When you leave your house, why do you lock your house? That's one measure of protectiveness that you have in place, that you've prepared, so that someone just can't go into your house and burglarize your home when you're not there. If you have a AAA membership, you could get discounts on rooms and other little things too. But the real reason you usually get that, why? You get a flat tire, your battery dies, something like that. You need to be towed. You got that AAA membership for a very reasonable price, and and we're not being endorsed, by the way, or sponsored by AAA.
No, of course not. No. Yeah, you could be any roadside, it could be any roadside assistance.
To protect yourself from those kind of situations possibly happening. If you wear a seatbelt, you don't want to get into a car accident, but obviously if you got into a car accident, it could help you from getting thrown out of the vehicle or thrown around the vehicle. I know one situation, a horrible situation that occurred not too far from where I live, where a person wasn't wearing the seatbelt, and they flew around the car, and the kids were in the seatbelts, but because they killed one of the kids, I think both the kids got killed, but they actually killed one of the kids themselves with their body moving around because they weren't belted into the car. So it's just a horrible tragedy and situation. So, so what if you lived and then that was the case? That's just another situation that could happen. If you have a first aid kit, if you have like I said, if you have the first aid kit, you have that in case you get a cut, in case you get some sort of injury, you can deal with it effectively. If you have jumper cables in your car, in case your battery dies, you're able to maybe have someone jump, or maybe you have a jump box or something like that to be able to jump your battery if you get a dead battery. You have a spare tire, because a spare tire, a jack, and a lug wrench, because if you get a flat tire, it's going to help a lot and save you a lot of troubles. Turn that from a minor problem or a big problem into more of an inconvenience than anything. So if you do any of those things, any one of those things that I just said, you're a prepper. You're prepared to some degree. Okay. But so the truth is that every person is really a prepper. Everyone's a prepper to some level. They develop prepping skills to a certain level. Okay. They've developed a certain level of preparedness, but some people are weak preppers. Some people are more like casual preppers. Some people are serious preppers, and some people more would be what I refer to as elite preppers. Okay. And that's our real goal. And if you think about it, it's just like in martial arts, just like in personal protection, just like in self-defense, they have levels, right? In martial arts, right, you have in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we have white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt, so on and so forth, all your right up to a red belt, right? So there's different levels of excellence and technical knowledge and experience that you have in Jiu-Jitsu. Most self-defense programs will have levels like, beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert, so on and so forth. So they have levels of excellence, levels of preparedness in that martial art. And it's the same thing with preparedness in terms of the things we're talking about here, that you can be a various level of a prepper. I remember visiting my good friend Tony Blauer's gym in Montreal, and he had this picture of Brandon Lee on the wall. And it was really amazing what Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee's son, what Brandon wrote was amazing on the poster, on his picture. What he said was, for what level of imperfection will you settle? For what level of imperfection will you settle? Now think about that. None of us are perfect. None of us are perfect in jiu-jitsu. None of us are perfect in our kickboxing, our self-defense, our tactical weapons, our preparedness, any of that. None of us are perfect. We can all improve. But he's saying, what level of imperfection will you settle? There's a big difference between settling for a level and not being at a level. Like, I might not be at a level, but I might desire to acquire that level. And that's really what's important. So I think that really sums up really well what I'm trying to get across this week about being a prepper. You already know that we've already determined that you are a prepper, even if you're just a casual or more of a lower level prepper, right? Even if you're a white belt prepper, you're still training. You're still a prepper to some degree, but we want to move up in levels. We want to grow, so to speak. So in some way, shape, or form, you're a prepper. But yet none of us are totally prepared. We're just not, no person is totally prepared in every way. It's a lifelong process. When we prepare properly, we can become more self-reliant. And I think that's important, not to always be dependent on other people, on the government. Not that we can't take help for other things and certain things. But of course, something bad happens, you go to the hospital, they're going to be better equipped to deal with it. But what if you can't? What if you can't get there? Are you able to manage or do something? Are you able to be self-reliant? Or are you totally dependent on others to be able to maintain your safety and security? That's more what we're talking about here. So, so being more self-reliant, as well as being connected to other people who are like-minded and aren't selfish and are also team players. It's not about just having other people to work with. It's having like-minded people that aren't selfish, who are also team players. They want to contribute. They don't mind receiving, but they also want to give as well. So that's kind of important. Connect yourself to those kind of people as far as preparedness is concerned.
I think, so building a community, or like many, and just like making a parenthesis here in what you're saying, just because, I get a little bit political because I'm passionate about this stuff. Right now, I already got many things from you, but one big thing we see, like you said, self-reliance, because 5 minutes waiting for the first responder, it's already, too long. Number two is in a moment of crisis. So if a crisis is happening overall in the community, that 5 minutes will be multiplied by God knows, how many times. So it might take 50 minutes if maybe help comes. And so it's very important to not always expect that, we're going to have somebody to come to save us. And a lot of people nowadays, I see a lot of people that adopt narratives and ideologies fighting this idea of the having a tribe, which I call it more community, like your closer community, because they don't want us to be so close together in contact, helping each other. Because every time we become self-reliant and every time we become a community around us, where we can provide help to others, or we can get help by others, what we're doing is we're eliminating a little bit this dependency that we have, from the state, like waiting for the state to save us. But anyway, go ahead. I just want to make this parenthesis because
those are great points, Professor. And I think kind of like to line up real quick with just a little side note again, in line with what you were saying about like emergency response. How long it takes for them to actually show up. And when you consider what the national averages or even what the quickest places in the country are. And we had the Stop the Bleed course at our reality camp this year, and that we were both running and teaching at. And when we had the Stop the Bleed course, that's one of the things that said that bleeding is one of from what I remembered, it was the number one preventable cause of death. So, but a person can totally bleed out in a matter of minutes. So if you're able to just even maintain or control the bleeding, get control over that bleeding till emergency response gets there, you still saved a life because, like they said, they can, once they get there, if the person bleeds out and they're dead, there's nothing they can do, right? If you do something and it causes an infection, then they can treat them with antibiotics. Once they're dead, they can't do nothing. So just being able to control that bleeding long enough for the experts to get there, even for the ambulance to get there or whatever, and save that person's life is important. Now, if they're not going to get there, then we do everything we can to save the person. But even just being prepared to be able to delay something really extreme happening, like the person dying, long enough for emergency response services to get there when 911 is called, that alone is another huge level of preparedness. And in fact, one of my students actually had his grandmother, who was over 100 years old, fell and hit her head and was bleeding like crazy. And it was literally happened within a week of the Stop the Bleed course that he just did at our camp. And they used everything till the ambulance got there. Is that amazing? So it's literally maybe a week and a half after the camp. So I just thought that was it's not cool that his grandmother obviously hurt her head. And she was just a wonderful lady because I've met her a few times. But the fact that they were able to control the bleeding, so God forbid something could have happened and she could have died, because she still had a few days in the hospital that were pretty rough. But because he did the course, they right off the bat knew what to do. And in fact, when they called 911, they were basically telling them to do the same type of thing. So that's kind of neat.
Absolutely.
So it's really when we settle for a certain level of preparedness, like, well, this is prepared enough. That's without desiring to improve, without desiring to grow. That's really the problem. That's what I try to discourage people from getting that way. Like, I'm prepared enough, kind of look, even if it's just a slow growth, something every day, a little better here, a little better there, just growing. Growth is life, right? If movement is life, growth is life. If you stop moving, you stop growing. It's like sort of almost like you're dead, So basically, we want to avoid that as much as possible. Getting that attitude that you're prepared enough, without having that you don't have a desire to improve or grow. We never want to get to that point. So we need to analyze how do we prepare. We need to analyze how we don't prepare, where we're not prepared, what we don't do at all for preparing, where we need improvement, where we need maintenance, where we need mastery. So we may have things in place already. We maintain those. We may have things, but we're not very good at them, so we need to master them, take them to another level. We may have certain things that we don't even have at all that we need to add them. So it's very important for us to spend time kind of analyzing and evaluating. The reason I'm doing so much of the cerebral side of the mindset side of preparedness in these initial programs is because it's all about mindset. If you're thinking you're going to be into preparedness or a prepper or anything like that and not have a tough mindset, if you get in a survival situation, it's freezing cold, you got you barely have any food or water, whatever the case may be, the first thing you need to have is a strong mindset to build that you're going to survive in that situation. Or maybe you have food, but not what you would normally like to eat. You got to be tough. You got to say, look, I'm a warrior. I'm going to survive. I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to overcome. So first and foremost, we focus on surviving. And if we can go beyond surviving to thriving, that's great. But survival is always the primary thing that we want to focus on, so that you have that mental toughness that allows you to know you will survive. You're going to overcome. You're going to be creative. You're going to be adaptive. And of course, if you have those preps in place in the first place, that makes that a lot easier. But still having that mental toughness, that mindset, not to let yourself go into any type of panic or let that situation overcome you, is so crucial. And you can have all the things in the world in your preparedness bag, or if you want to call it a bug out bag, go bag, whatever you want to call it. And if you don't have the right mindset, the situation can overcome you. Fear can overcome you, and you could fail just because of that. I love that saying. Again, I use it a lot, and Tony Blauer's quoted this quite a bit. I believe it was Dan Millman said, when faced with just one opponent and you doubt yourself, you're outnumbered. So it's like we need to have that. And then Zig Ziglar says, whether we say we can or can't, we're right. So we got to kind of have that kind of mindset that as a warrior, we're going to overcome, we're going to deal with the situation, and we're going to survive and overcome. Another thing I want to stress too is spending your time and energy effectively. Okay, for example, lots of people spend lots of time on things that aren't productive, like just wasting your time listening to certain. I mean, it could be music, could be certain things that you do, TV shows, this and that. I understand people have to have. It's okay to have fun, enjoy yourself, and do things you like to do. I'm not trying to say never to do that stuff, but there's so much you could accomplish if you were in your vehicle driving around or at the gym working out. Like, I always listen to educational stuff. Literally 95% of the time or more, I'm listening to something about fight psychology, survival, jiu-jitsu, listen to all the guys, the top jiu-jitsu players of all time, fighters of all time, the interviews and everything. I mean, but I don't just approach it like one dimension, like just jiu-jitsu, just kickboxing, just survival. I also consider how they all factor in and can connect and create a synergy between one another. So that's so important. Use your time effectively, and you'll become a prepper, better, more prepared just by analyzing your daily environment, what you need, what you don't need, what you could do with, and what you need, what you can do without. Very important to think that way. So spending your time and energy efficiently and effectively. My coach, Joe Lewis, that was like one of his premier principles. He's my mentor, one of my premier instructors, but he called it efficacy. Efficacy is when we do things efficiently and effectively. When you have both efficiency and effectiveness combined, that's efficacy. So do things with efficacy, Once you determine whatever level of imperfection you're willing to settle for, then it's easier to establish a goal, a strategy, or set of disciplines designed to accomplish whatever you want. Now, maybe you don't have a level of imperfection you want to settle. You're like, I ain't settling for anything. I just want to get better and better. That's the best. That's usually that person that becomes what I call an elite preparedness person. Okay, elite preparedness. But if you say, I just want to become very good or excellent, then you have a limit. There's still a limit, but at least you can kind of plan out how you're going to do that and come up with a plan as to what that means. As far as the idea of mastery or perfection, always remember this. I have a saying that I actually use this quote in one of the Black Belt magazine interviews before, but it's strive for mastery and perfection, but never believe you've achieved it. Mm-hmm. Strive for mastery and perfection, but never believe you've achieved it. And the reason I say this, as soon as I think I've achieved mastery and perfection in everything or something or whatever the case might be, what's the tendency to do? To stop learning, to stop growing, to stop listening, to stop thinking someone else might come up with a better way of doing it. So if I think I'm perfect or I do something perfect, why would I listen to someone else's way of doing it? But if you think, look, I realize I'm really good. I put a lot of time and effort into this. I know my stuff, but I'm going to listen to other ways because someone else, I may have it really good, but someone else might have it just a little better. And if that's the case, then I want to do it that way. So now we sort of know that we're all preppers, right? We've determined, but we have to determine what level of prepper we want to be, right? And then strive towards those standards or that goal the rest of our lives. So what are some things we could prepare for? Just like primary things you think of a lot of times in martial arts is a violent attack, home invasion, carjackings, burglaries. It's sad though that when you think of these kind of things in martial arts, that how much time and effort people will spend to prepare for a tournament or a kickboxing match or MMA match, which is great. And I think they're wonderful. I love them, love watching them. But Jeff Cooper, who's the father of American handgunning, he said this, the founder of Gunsight, he said, it's sad that people will train harder for a little medal or a little trophy that they might win at a sport shooting competition than a lot of times law enforcement or military will train with their firearm so they can come home alive in the evening to their family. So it's just a matter of getting our priorities straight, So what are some other things we prepare for? It's not just the violent attacks or the home invasions, carjackings, burglaries. Could be a hurricane like we're seeing going on right now. Could be a tornado. Could be a flood. Could be a drought. Could be riots in the streets. All these things we pretty much see. We've seen hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, riots, pandemics. Economic uncertainty or collapse. We're seeing that right now. There's a possibility there, and pretty much looks like something major is about to happen. Well, recession or depression, war. We see a war right now between Russia and Ukraine, and that could very easily spread or way beyond those areas. Could be some massive snowstorm. Could be your vehicle safety or breakdown management. You break down with your car, you get a flat tire. It doesn't have to be something always major either. It could be smaller things. Just having water in your car, whatever the case might be. Could be having a first aid kit. Could be illegal invasions. Could be supply shortages. Could be a nuclear threat. Could be EMP. Could be any number of things. Right. So. I recommend this when it comes to preparedness with all those things I've thought of. Now, we've seen pandemics. We've seen riots. We've seen economic uncertainty. We've seen droughts. We've seen floods, hurricanes. We've seen war now. We've seen, illegal invasions. We've seen all these things like they're prevalent, in the last few years, and some of them on multiple occasions. Start with the definite. Prepare for the definite. You need to have shelter. You need to have water. You need to have food. You need to have medical. You need to have protection and security. There's certain things, communication, certain things you want to have in place. You need to have options that are both high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech. If you have the high-tech options available to you, great, use them. If not, maybe it's going to be a more low-tech option. If you don't have either of them, a no-tech option is better than no option. So high-tech, low-tech, no-tech, and no. Right? If I have to choose between no-tech, but it's still an option, and no option, I'm going to choose the no-tech option. No-tech simply means where we have an option, but it's not using technology. It's more primitive or more primal. Of course, using a bow, a bow drill to start a fire is not as preferred as using a lighter or something like that, right? Obviously, we'd rather do that. But if you have no other option, at least no tech is an option. At least gives you some sort of option, and that's kind of how we develop. Make sure you have your more high tech, low tech stuff in place, and then start to work on those low tech options as well, so that no matter what situation you're put in, you always have some way of dealing with something versus being totally limited, limited or unable to deal with. So start with the definite options, things that you're going to need. Then go to the probable things that it's probable you need, and then go to the possible things that you could need, and think in terms of that. And then also look at the culture, look at the environment, look at what's happening around you. Pay attention. Don't just have blinders onto one perspective or one view or the other. Analyze what everyone's saying. Use your common sense and intelligence. Listen to your gut feeling and intuition, things like that. They'll tell you a lot. Okay. So I stress this: we got to be more than a grappler, more than a striker, more than a weapons specialist in order to be a total martial artist and deal with a lot of these threats. A hurricane or a tornado or a flood does not care at all about how good your guard is or how good your triangle choke is. And you're not going to use your triangle choke against a hurricane. You're not going to use a tie kick or a cut kick or a straight right against it, right? They're good to know. We need to learn that stuff. Obviously, I do that. I've done that my whole life. Love it. But some situations, your martial arts can leave you feeling totally helpless and hopeless if your martial arts is only a physical martial art that involves grappling and striking. So although we need those things as well, we need to be more than that to be a totally like we call preparedness specialist is what we're going towards. Okay. And that's our preparedness principle of the week.
Awesome. So I wrote down many things here as you were speaking. And then I think we have so much to develop off of this. As far as the medical, this is an interesting story. I was doing some firearms training with Kyle DeFore from, the Four Performance shooting. And both the guys that I trained the most, Bill Rapier and Kyle DeFore, they always have a medical section of the training where they just explain basic application of tourniquets, what is a good tourniquet, what is a bad tourniquet, how to apply it. Very basic, which helps, of course. We are shooting, we're doing some training, accidents can happen. But Kyle DeFore was saying that one time he was teaching a class and they heard a car crash and they rushed to see, and I think it was a more remote area. Hopefully one day I can bring him to the podcast. He's a great, really great guy to talk to. And of course, Bill Rapier. And they said when they got there, one of, I think the driver had a major bleeding, and because we all carry tourniquets, they managed to control the bleeding until first response came. So it could be something like that, right? Like not just to help us, but to help other people. And
absolutely.
Another thing that I think, I don't know exactly where the quote comes from, but I heard this from Bill Rapier, that we shouldn't be always attached to hardware or software. And it means some people, they get stuck one thing they like, say this is, we heard this mostly in the firearms training world. All right. Some people get so hooked up to something, and then something else better shows up, and then it's developed, and people have this resistance. So, and the software is pretty much technique, right? Just going through my personal firearms training and development, I got in contact with another great guy, Matt Pranka from X-Ray Alpha, and he gave me amazing tips in just a few hours, and that shift a lot how I've been practicing. But so that is a change in software. So that goes back to what you were saying as far as we have to keep evolving and adopting different techniques or different approaches and mindset. Sorry, guys, that I always look for who's listening to this on Spotify. It doesn't matter where I'm looking at, but on YouTube, it's kind of weird because I'm looking to my right to write down notes, look to my left to look at you. Now, based on what you said, I have two other things here. So one is a question and one is something that I would like to bring up. But one is, like you mentioned, I'm just going to use my own words. based on our own reality. Let's say my reality. My reality is I live in, Connecticut, so we don't have here like those, the threat of a major hurricane, but we do have storms. We do have snowstorms. I live in a pretty safe area. Of course, I cannot lower my guard, so I have to think about my personal security protocols. But do you think it's worth it for people to maybe make a list of what could happen based on where they live, based on what they live, or like the type of work, and just make a list? Okay, I live in Arizona. Arizona tends to be super ultra hot, right? And let's say I'm driving in a remote area, super hot. So I'm always commuting. I should always have extra water in my car in case my car breaks down. So having those lists, do you think it's worth it if maybe we could tell our listeners and viewers to think about first step is preparedness, to make a list of possible events that can happen and can affect your life in a critical scenario based on where you live and what you do? Do you think it's a good way to start? Based on lookout.
And if you think about it, when we look at like even in our RMA principles, right? One of our RMA principles, which is will be the next one we would cover a little bit more in detail in the podcast tonight. We were supposed to talk about 7MAT and MAP it, but the one that falls right after is what we call the ABCs of self-defense, which is the appropriated battle concepts. So you appropriate, in other words, your strategy, your approach, your training, so on and so forth, could be based on age, size, gender, physical challenges and limitations, your objective, your culture, your location, the environment you're in, any number of things. So appropriating, basically appropriating means doing what's appropriate for you, appropriating your training in such a way that it fits you best, works for you best, meets your needs best. So that would fall right in under the criteria of that. And as far as where you live and how to prep and so on and so forth. One book there's certain things that are in general you're going to need. You're going to need shelter. You need protection from the elements. You're going to need water. You need food. You're going to need, still the medical. A lot of that stuff doesn't really change. It's just the way that you protect yourself maybe from the elements can change, and so on and so forth. We'll get more into that as far as like where you live, sheltering, prepping for your home, mobile prepping, like in your vehicle, if you're on foot, if you're out on a trip camping, whatever the case. So there's different ways we prepare and make sure that we're never like, we don't want to be just prepared one place. Like for example, if I'm going on a trip fairly soon, and the way that I prepare for that, I mean, my vehicle is prepped for just about anything that can happen, and I have AAA, I have those sort of things, but I also have certain things in place that sort of prepare me for any of the primary things that could there's a good chance can happen, including if I was just stuck there and had to stay warm and keep, if there was a necessity for shelter or food or water or fire, whatever the case would be, I'm able to deal with these things. But so, yeah, you should always appropriate. And you appropriate on any number of levels. Some people have a lot of land. Some people have a little bit of land. Some people have a big home. Some people have a small home. Some people have a cellar. Some people don't have a cellar. And you might say, well, why are you bringing all those things up? Because all those things are going to affect how you store your preps, where you store your preps, how much you can prep. And you start to have to get creative as far as, like there's people that will put preps in bins under their beds because they're just limited. Mm-hmm. They're living in a small apartment, and maybe in a, some people have I have a fairly good places that I'm able to store things, but some people may not have that. So you have to, and some people have better options than I have, so you appropriate based on what's available to you and just do the best you can. I think we talked about that last week, which is just get started and do the best you can. If you're doing something, you're doing more than most people, and like there's some people out there that just do nothing, or they use that as an excuse. Well, I have a little apartment, or I don't have this, or I don't have much money. And they just do nothing. But had they done something over the course of a year, if you said you don't do nothing, do you sit around playing video games all the time? Well, yeah. How much are those video games? Oh, well, now they're like $70 to $100 or more, for a video game. Yeah. Well, buy some canned food instead of video games. And I'll tell you the truth, a little secret. I play video games occasionally. Yeah, I reward myself. I study, I train, I do all this stuff all the time. And every 2-3 months, I'll give myself like an afternoon, 3-4 hours, and I play, and I enjoy it when I play, but I don't play often. But most of the time, I'm listening to something educational or learning or training or studying, researching. If I do good, I'll even plan out like my whole week. If you do this, and this, you get to play video games Saturday afternoon. So I'm like, yes. So, but I don't just do it willy nilly, because then you'd be wasting a lot of time on unfruitful stuff that's not going to really grow you or improve you as a martial artist, or as a person, or as or as someone who's into preparedness.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, appropriate, but don't come up with excuses why you can't. Come up with ways. It's like in a fight. If I'm fighting someone, I go, well, I can't beat this guy because he's this belt and this, or he's this size, or he's this strength, or he's this level and style. You can't think that way. You have to have the attitude that you're going to be an overcomer. You're going to figure out a way to tip the scales in your favor and overcome. So and that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about too, cumulative impact and synergistic effect. So cumulative impact means if I have, even with regards to the tournament that's relevant, like competition, if I have 100 negative things occurring all at once, the weight of those 100 things is really overwhelming and can kind of make me just kind of want to give up and quit. If I have 100 positive things happening and 100 negative things happening, they kind of neutralize each other. If I get rid of those 70 of those negative things and have 100 positive things, now we start to go more above water. I'm starting to the scales are starting to tip to my favor. They're going to kind of tip in my favor. So that's kind of how I look at it. Is that cumulative effect is, we were talking about the tournament. Every time if I'm prepared for this, don't have to deal with this, don't have all those little stressors that are removed, give me less stress at the competition. I'm able to focus, keep my cool, stay calm, and focus on what I have to do. I know we weren't really going to competition tonight, but it is related. And it's the same thing in prepping. Do a little bit here and there, save a little water, get a little bit of food, get a little bit of medical supplies, just whatever you can, every so often do it. Before you know it, in a year, you're going like, wow. I mean, maybe the person's like, I don't have a lot of money, or I have a small apartment, or I don't have this, but I got a lot of preps. I got a pretty organized prep, and then you take some plastic storage tote bins, put a piece of masking tape or a label on it, write on it, whatever it is, if it's food, if it's medical supplies, if it's shelter supplies, and put them on a couple shelving units in whatever area you got, depending on the size, the area you have. And within 6 months to a year, you have a pretty good setup of preps. I have mine very organized. I'm a little crazy like that, but it's just getting the ball rolling. So yes. And short answer to his question is yes. Appropriate to whatever situation you're in. Do the best you can, like we said last week, and just don't give yourself any excuses not to be a prepper.
Hopefully, I'll be able to bring like Bill or Kyle before, but I just like to mention that within the SIAC system, they do have a preparedness formula, the readiness formula, which is like three things, right? Awareness, willingness, and preparedness. And I really like the way that's kind of like goes around. You need to be aware of for instance, I think that's pretty much what we're saying. I like the way that they put this into a formula. We explain a little bit different, but it's interesting to see the similarity. And we always say, like, people that are legit and are not self-claiming, it's just like it's good or weird. We don't want to say like I am legit, but the truth is, every time I'm around people that are legit, we see universals that even if we never communicated with each other, and even if we have a different language besides, language, but just like different terms, we see those universals as being like real. Yeah. And then hopefully when I have a chance to bring one of those guys in, we can talk about that, because that would be a different perspective, but at the same time, it's still preparedness. So anyway, as far as like we can just like glance very quick, just to mention again the 7 mat arsenal very quick. I know you got to go, but so I just don't want to not have the segment, the reality warrior principle. So let's go with the segment with the reality warrior principle, and we can just glance if you want to just go over again to refresh, and then on the next episode we expand those when we go back talking about also competition.
Okay, so this week for the warrior principles, or reality warrior principles, we're going to talk about we call 7 MAT in our RMA program. 7 MAT stands for 7 main arsenal tools. So you have 7 main arsenals and then specific tools within each one of those arsenals. So, for example, we have the striking arsenal, which can include punches, kicks, knees, elbows, as well as various defensive options, headbutts, things like that. Anything you can basically do to strike a person or counter their strikes as well. So the offensive and defensive elements of striking, which can include mobility and footwork and so on and so forth, posture, all those things that we have to be aware of when it comes to striking. So you have your striking arsenal, and then there's, again, specific tools in that arsenal. Then we have the grappling arsenal. Grappling arsenal has two categories, both A and B. It can be stand-up and ground, but that can include throws, takedowns, chokes, arm bars, wrist locks, leg submissions, sweeps, reversals, guard passes, anything to do with the grappling elements of as far as fighting is concerned. You got striking and then grappling. Okay, grappling has both A and B, stand-up and ground type grappling options. Then we also have the biting arsenal, and biting can be used to distract, it can be used to weaken, it can be used to damage, it can be used to destroy. We have the biting arsenal, which can be used to kind of facilitate or create opportunities or openings to use more like finishing types of options. Maybe it could set up a strike, maybe it could set up a choke, so on and so forth. So you have striking, grappling, biting. Then we have eye attacks, okay? And as far as eye attacks are concerned, you can strike an eye, you can apply pressure to an eye, you can poke an eye, you can rake an eye. There's all different ways that we attack the eyes, but eye attacks another valuable arsenal to understand and have skill in. Then we have the body handles arsenal. This can be grabbing skin, grabbing hair, grabbing groin, grabbing clothing, so on and so forth. Anything we use to grab and control our opponent with, fingers, so on and so forth. Then we have nerve attacks and pain points. And again, we can strike, pressure, or apply a rub the nerves. We can use them to, or use a combination of those. So understanding pain points and nerve attacks also is an important arsenal in real fighting. Again, oftentimes not going to end a fight, but it can do a lot to create space or even enhance striking skills. Because as I said last time, if you know exactly where to kick a certain, fire a kick to the side of the leg and hit a specific area where there's like the common peroneal nerve, those kind of areas, you're going to get more for your buck when you fire that kick than if you just hit just generally the outside of the leg and not really aware of where you're placing the kick. So that's your nerve attacks and pain points. And then we have expedient weapon or environmental weaponry. And those can come in two forms. Conventional weaponry, which is a combat-specific weapon, means it's made to be a weapon, like a firearm, pepper spray, collapsible baton, so on and so forth. Those things are made to be weapons. Or it could be unconventional or a makeshift or improvised weapon, which could be a chair, hot cup of coffee, dirt, frying pan. Those things aren't necessarily made to be weapons, but could be used as a weapon or as an improvised weapon. So when we think about these 7 arsenals, striking, grappling, biting, eye attacks, body handles, nerve attacks, and weaponry, we might think, which is the best arsenal? Which one is the best? Is grappling better than striking? Is striking better than grappling? Is weapons better than both? The truth is, the answer is none of them and all of them. And as I said before, if the best thing to do is strike, you strike. If the best thing to do is use a grappling skill, use a grappling skill. If the best thing that you do is use a conventional weapon, use a conventional weapon. If the best thing to do is bite or gouge eyes, then you bite or gouge eyes. It's very simple. It's not about ego. It's not one trying to prove they're better than the other. The truth is, all 7 of them operate much in a similar way to like an Army Special Forces A team or ODA would operate. They're like a team. They work synergistically. And they know, in other words, if the biting might create the space, which sets up the strike, which sets up the submission. So they've all worked together synergistically. So we talked about cumulative impact before. This is what we call synergistic effect, is when all these elements come together and work synergistically, not trying to like fight each other, oppose one another, but they work together as a team to create what we talked about earlier, which was efficacy. Efficiency and effectiveness all at the same time. So when you use your 7 main arsenal tools, your striking, your grappling, your biting, eye attacks, body handles, nerve attacks, and environmental weaponry, synergistically, we're going to get that cumulative impact, we're going to get synergistic effect, and we're going to get efficacy, which is again efficiency and effectiveness happening both at the same time. What I'll tell people next week, we'll talk a bit about map it, which is the other side of 7 map, right? The defensive element. Like I can attack you with 7 main arsenals, but potentially you could attack me with 7 main arsenals as well. So we'll talk about that next time. But when it comes to developing your 7 map skills, think of the word name, N-A-M-E, like name. What is your name? And the first part of that is actually to name, to identify each arsenal. You need to name them. And I tell people, try to say them quickly. I'm going to say them quickly on purpose now. I talk quick anyway, but I'm going to say it quickly. Striking, grappling, biting, eye attacks, body handles, nerve attacks, environmental weaponry. Why do I want to say it quick? Because my brain can think of them that quickly. When I'm in certain situations, I'm aware of those being my options quickly in a situation. So I want to be able to name them. Secondly, I want to advance in them. In other words, develop skill in each one of those, in my striking, in my grappling, biting, eye attacks, body handles, nerve attacks, and weaponry. And then I want to mix them. We're talking about synergy now. I want to learn to develop so they work together synergistically as a team, getting the most efficient and effective result possible. And then I want to employ them, be able to use them, put them into action when I need to in a defense or a combative situation. So that's the 7 main arsenal tools. Again, try to think of one as better than the other. They're all useful. And guess what? Like I said, if biting, you don't need to bite, don't bite. Mm-hmm. If you don't need to use an eye gouge, don't use an eye gouge. Very simple. If you can win without, then don't. No one says you have to. But I would say this, if there's one move that means the difference between winning and losing, whether that's biting, whether that's a choke, whether that's a kick, whether that's a firearm or an edge weapon, if it means the difference between winning or losing, means the difference between saving or not saving the life of the person that matters most to you. Do you want to be without that arsenal option? Do you want to be without that skill? Do you want to be without that tool? For me, the answer is no. For you, you have to choose what the answer is to that question.
Fantastic. I think we have so much. That's why I decided to invite you to be the co-host of this podcast. And I really like to bring Greg Davis too, because Greg is
Absolutely.
Long time martial artist. So that would be a lot to talk to, especially when we start talking about striking, because he has an amazing experience as a 7th degree Hawaiian Kempo guy. So so we have a lot. We have a lot of homework, and then you guys too, the listeners and whoever is watching us. That's your homework. Start going over your list. Start going over your own reality. Start thinking about this stuff. Maybe if you could send us like some other questions, and or just like different things. Maybe like we are not covering some things that you already thought. So write a comment in our YouTube channel or send us an email. We're gonna have the descriptions down below here in the description. The emails there. Send us, anything you would like us to cover in more depth. We're going to explore, we're going to dive deeper into each item and everything we're talking about. And then the next one, we go back to competition and keep moving on with the preparedness, keep moving on with the reality warrior principle. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe wherever you're getting this, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube. We're doing this to build our community. We're doing this regardless if you're a member of any school connected to us. Maybe you are someone from a sister school or sister system, or brother from another tribe. I have my Tienza brothers. I have my Sayak brothers. I have, my ATT brothers. I have my core brothers and sisters. So we have so many people somewhat connected to us, and building this community of people. Maybe, we don't even know each other. We have so many people already listening and following us, but we are building a community. So at least we can be a reference for many people, and strengthening our families, is strengthening, our links with our friends, with our neighbors. It's very important. We're thinking about, if I ever move out of Connecticut one day, one big concern is I want to know my neighbor. I want to know people in the community. If you are a Christian religious person, going to a church and you start making connections a good way, or maybe you engage in another type of activity that can get you closer to other people. And then you see if you fit into that community, or if that person fits in your community. Because at the end of the day, like Shihan said, we never know how long help will, take to reach us, and if they will, be able to reach us. So being our first respondent, being fully capable, being stronger, and strengthening the weak, it's a major mission that I took upon my life, because it's easier to work with people that are highly capable. It's really easy to work with people that think like you, or that have the same skills and love exactly the same things that you love. But I think there's a bigger mission there, where I want to get somebody that never thought about this stuff, and that will be potentially a victim of, any type of situation, dangerous situation like that, and show this person how important it is to embrace your own self-protection, and self-protection through preparedness, through being able to improvise, know how to cook, know maybe basic mechanics, know basic things that you don't think you will ever need. But God knows, maybe you get stranded someplace else. And if you have a basic understanding of something that related to that situation, it can help you, can save your family. So that's huge. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shehan, again. Always a
Thank you,
pleasure.
sir.
I think this is a great, we can spend more time together
And
here online.
Professor, can I just say one thing real quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just want to say to the listener to realize that, and we know, we're well aware of the fact we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. We're learning, training, studying every day. We've dedicated our lives to this, done this for many years, but we still don't know everything. And nobody will ever know everything. If you guys have any ideas or suggestions, ways we could do things better, like he said, like Professor said, send them in to us. Give us maybe some ideas, some ways you do things. We're not going to take it as an insult or like maybe your way is better than our way, but we're sharing a way maybe with someone that doesn't know anything. And I look at it like, I work in my church and I do ministry, and I don't do that to try to like act like I'm better than anybody, because I'm no better. I'm no better than you. Nobody's better than anybody. We all stand equal before the Lord. That's how I look at it. But here's how I look at it. I share because I care. I share because I love people. And there's a saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I want you to know that I could keep all the preparedness, knowledge, and information and insights to myself. Professor Luigi could do the same thing. In some ways, strategically, it might make more sense. But the fact that I care about people is why I don't do that. And the fact that he cares about people is why he doesn't do that. So we do this because we care about you. Maybe you're even better at this stuff than I am. Maybe you're better at it than Professor Luigi is. You very well could be. And that's great. Good for you. We're hoping that we share some information with somebody else that maybe isn't that good and helps them to get better. And if you have all that great information, please let me know, because I love learning from great teachers and instructors. Send me an email, send us some, because we're always down for good, solid, practical, useful information, and we will just appreciate it. We'll even give you a little shout out or acknowledgement the fact that you contributed to what we're doing. So then I just want to thank you for that.
Absolutely. And even like if you're a master, somebody with that level of understanding in whatever area and you want to participate, send us a note and we set up this super easy. You can be in your house. I'll tell you like what you need to go online with us, and we chat and we keep building a strong society and get back into being really good, patriotic Americans, saying the Brazilian here. All right. Thank you very much, guys. God bless you all, and see you next week.